The UN recognizes 193 countries, but 206 countries participated in the Olympics last year. How? Isn't the UN a community of all countries in the world? Well, today we are talking about exactly that, states that exist but are not sovereign even though they have their own army, passport, capital city, and even a national team at the Olympics. Before we start, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. It's a few seconds and you anytime can change your mind. Now let's start. As I said in my first video on the channel, for a country to truly be a country it needs four things: a permanent population, defined territory, a government, and the ability to enter relations with other states. But here's the catch: recognition is political, not scientific. Now you're even more confused, but I'll explain. The UN organization decides whether a territory is truly a country or not. For a territory to become a state, it needs to pass the UN Security Council first. What is the Security Council now? The United Nations Security Council, or UNSC, is a primary organ of the UN with the main responsibility of maintaining international peace and security. It has 15 members, 5 permanent: China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, and 10 non-permanent members elected for 2-year terms by the UN General Assembly. A country can request that a UNSC member consider the proposal at the next meeting. Then it is necessary that at least 9 out of 15 members vote yes, and that none of the 5 permanent members veto. If only one member vetoes, the candidate is automatically eliminated. However, if it passes at the UNSC meeting, the next step is the UN General Assembly. In the UN General Assembly, more than 66% of member states must vote to recognize a country, which is 128 out of 193 members. If you pass all this, congratulations, you have become a true sovereign country. But now you must be wondering, GeoGlass, why would they reject a country if it just wants to become a member of the UN? Well, countries that are not recognized by the UN are mostly disputed territories or are in conflict with another state and therefore cannot become a member. The example I mentioned in the first clip is, for example, Kosovo, a disputed territory of Serbia that declared independence with an illegitimate constitution, but is not recognized by more than 66% of its members and was vetoed by Russia at the UNSC. It has all the characteristics of a state, but it is not officially recognized, and the UNSC members are putting pressure on Serbia to recognize Kosovo, because that way it will truly gain independence, and with that recognition, Russia will not need to use its veto at the next meeting. Countries you won't believe aren't members of the UN: Vatican, Palestine, and Taiwan. I know, I would never believe it either. However, in this clip I will introduce you to countries that you have probably never heard of and that you will never find on a map because they are not recognized. The first country we're going to talk about is Western Sahara, or Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. Some may have heard of this country. It is located in Africa, in the western part of the Sahara, logically. It borders Mauritania, Algeria, Morocco, and to the west has access to the Atlantic. It has a surface area of 272,000 square kilometers. Although it has an area similar to the UK, it is home to a population 110 times smaller. With an estimated population of around 560,000 inhabitants, it is the most sparsely populated territory in Africa and the second most sparsely populated territory in the world. This state is recognized by only 47 UN members, and is not fully independent and sovereign. But, why? As I said before, cases like this arise due to conflicts of interest between countries. As with every conflict in Africa, the colonial powers are to blame. At the end of the 19th century, Spain colonized this territory and it was under its control until 1975. The territory was mainly inhabited by the Sahrawis, an Arab Berber people who lived a nomadic lifestyle. After Spain left the territory, a conflict arose between Morocco, which believed that everything belonged to them, Mauritania, which believed that they should govern this territory, and the Sahrawis, who just wanted independence. The locals launch an independence movement called the Polisario Front and the war begins. Mauritania withdrew from this conflict in 1979, while Morocco aggressively penetrated the territory of Western Sahara. The Western Sahara Army couldn't cope with the Moroccan army, and a ceasefire was reached in 1991 under pressure from the UN. A referendum on this conflict was promised, but it never happened. It's simply not geopolitically important and Western powers hate to deal with it. Since the end of the war, Morocco has controlled 80% of the territory of Western Sahara. They control the largest cities and the most important natural resources, and have even built a large wall along the border with the warring state. The country's government is in exile in Algeria and it looks like it will stay that way for the foreseeable future. The next country is also located in Africa, and I bet you have never heard of it, and it is Somaliland. It borders Djibouti, Ethiopia and Somalia, from which it broke away. It is home to 6.2 million people who live on a territory of 180,000 square kilometers. In contrast to Western Sahara, Somaliland is successfully running its own state. But, how did this happen and why is this territory not internationally recognized? Take it easy, I'll explain now. In order to understand how this happened, we have to go back to the past, specifically to the 19th century. The territory of today's Somalia was colonized by the UK and Italy, which also occupied Ethiopia and Eritrea, but not important now. The northern part of Somalia was controlled by the British, while the southern part was controlled by the Italians. This division of one nation into two territories will have a great impact later. After gaining independence in 1960, the British part of Somalia voluntarily united with the Italian part. But, from the beginning, the inhabitants of the northern part felt that complete political power was in the hands of the south. That's why the civil war broke out in the 1980s and because of the brutal rule of Siad Barre. The north established a resistance movement called the Somali National Movement, while the Somali army responded by bombing cities like Hargeisa and Bureau. When Barre was finally overthrown in 1991, all of Somalia fell into chaos, and Somaliland took advantage of this to declare independence. Somaliland functions normally as a sovereign state, but it is still not internationally recognized. Why? Well, you see, if an international organization were to allow such a secession, it would just be a domino that would trigger the separation of parts of states around the world, and such chaos would ensue. So maybe it's better that it's not recognized. The next country is located in Europe, and I doubt anyone has heard of it. It's Transnistria. This small country is located on the border between Moldova and Ukraine, and broke away from Moldova in 1990. But why? How did that happen? To get the answer we have to go back to the past. This is the region of Moldova, this part today belongs to Romania, these parts to Ukraine and this to the country of Moldova. At the beginning of World War I, the western part of this territory belonged to Romania, while the eastern part belonged to Russia. Romania gained independence in 1877, and sought to unite with the territory of present-day Moldova, which at that time was part of the Russian Empire. Seeing this, the Russians began to populate that region, especially Transnistria, in order to prevent unification with Romania. After World War I, the Russian Empire collapsed and communism was established. Moldova took advantage of this to unite with Romania, but it did not include Transnistria. But 20 years later, World War II breaks out. Hitler and Stalin agree on how to divide Eastern Europe. To avoid invasion, the Romanians give Moldova to the Soviets. But in 1941, Germany broke its alliance with the USSR and launched a military offensive against them. Seeing this, Romania joins the Axis and returns the territory it ceded to the USSR and occupies new territories. However, the war turns in favor of the Soviets, and Romania also changes sides and goes to fight against Germany, just to avoid USSR invasion. Romania had to surrender Moldova again, and so Moldova became a republic within the Soviet Union and Transnistria became part of Moldova. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Moldova declared independence and turned to democratization. The Russian population within Moldova did not like this, and in 1990 they declared independence in the form of Transnistria. No one recognizes it except Russia, because they have their own interests there. Through Transnistria, Russia is expanding its influence in the region, preventing Moldova from becoming a member of the EU or NATO, and owning important gas and energy facilities. If you look a little closer, Transnistria was annexed to Moldova, even though it is mostly inhabited by Russians and Ukrainians, precisely to cause confusion and thus put Moldova in a compromising position. Of course, I don't even need to mention that no one except Russia recognizes Transnistria. The next country on this list is Northern Cyprus. This self-recognized state occupies the northern third of the island of Cyprus in the Adriatic Sea. Throughout history, Greeks and Turks have lived on this island, which belonged to the Ottoman Empire until the 19th century. The Ottoman Empire donated this island to the UK in 1878 to support them in the war with Russia, which wanted to conquer Istanbul and take control of trade in the Black Sea. During that period, Greeks made up 75% of the population, and after the First World War, there was a desire for unification with Greece. However, the British did not want to hand over Cyprus to Greece, due to its great geopolitical importance. Over time, tensions rose, and in 1950 a referendum was held in Cyprus in which 95% of the people voted for union with Greece. Seeing this, Turkey uses the presence of its people on the island as an excuse to divide the island into a Turkish and Greek part, rather than annexing the entire island to Greece. The Greek nationalist organization AOKA is established, aiming to expel the British from the island and unite with Greece. In order to maintain its bases, the UK supports the Turkish unrest just so that Cyprus does not become part of Greece. However, in 1960, Cyprus gained independence, and everyone was happy and satisfied. I'm kidding, of course, no one was satisfied with this. After various minor conflicts, in 1974 Greece carried out a military coup in Cyprus, and Turkey responded by invading the northern part of the island. The northern part declared independence, which no one except Turkey recognized. The UN established a buffer zone between the northern and southern parts, and an exchange of Greek and Turkish populations took place, which was not the first time they had done so. In recent years, efforts have been made to unify the islands and establish peace, but the Greeks and Turks are archenemies and it is very difficult to reach an agreement that will satisfy both sides. There are many more states around the world that are not officially recognized, as well as territories that have a tendency to secede. Then the question arises, what makes a country real? Is it recognition from others or the will of its people to exist, even when no one believes they do? These unrecognized nations may be invisible on maps, but they reveal something deeper about humanity's desire for identity, belonging, and independence. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave like and subscribe, and if you have suggestions for the next video, leave in the comments. To the next video, bye bye.